Hi class, welcome back. In this mini lecture, we are going to talk about language. So we all know that language allows us to communicate information and it serves social and emotional functions, but what exactly is language? Language is made up of a set of symbols. So for example, words or gestures, and rules for combining these symbols. So for example, grammar. And like I already mentioned, language does allow for communication of information with others, but it also allows for communication within ourselves. So thinking is a form of communication within ourselves, and we use language for that. Now we say that language is arbitrary because there's no reason why things are named what they're named, why the rules are what they are, and so on. So for example, why is computer called computer? Why is desk called desk? It's completely arbitrary. So we can define language as an arbitrary system of communication that combines symbols in rule-based ways to create meaning. Language is highly practiced and it involves automatic cognitive processes. So for example, using and interpreting language actually usually requires really little attention. But language is still pretty complex. So we must coordinate a few things. First, we have phonemes. Phonemes are categories of sounds that our vocal apparatus produces. It's the sounds of our language, are smallest units of sounds that humans can make. So for example, what is the sound of T? T. T is a phoneme. Or what is the sound of N? N. That is a phoneme. There are probably about 100 total phonemes, and each language uses only a subset of them. So 40 to 45 phonemes are present in English, whereas some languages have as little as 15 phonemes and some as many as 60 phonemes. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning in language, the smallest meaningful unit. It can be full words like horse, or it can be parts of words that have meaning, like the prefix pre. Syntax is the set of rules of a language that we use to construct grammatically correct sentences. This includes things like word order and sentence structure. Real-world language rarely follows this completely. Extra-linguistic information. Extra-linguistic information. These are non-language elements of communication. So parts of communication that aren't part of the content of language, but they're still absolutely critical to interpreting its meaning. So for example, facial expressions are extra-linguistic information, tone of voice, previous statements. So we use extra-linguistic information to interpret ambiguous information. So now think about a time when you sent an email or received an email or a text message and there was some sort of misunderstanding. This is in large part because emails and text messages lack extra-linguistic information. So this is what emojis are really good for. Children begin learning to recognize their native language even before they're born. And we know this because of research that has found that babies suck harder on pacifiers or in general when they hear their mom's native language as compared to a different language. Keep in mind that the auditory system is actually developed well enough by the 5th month of pregnancy. Cooing is the repetition of vowel sounds, and it lacks specific meaning. It's not meaningful. Cooing usually begins at 2 to 3 months of age, but more precise imitation begins at around 4 to 6 months of age. So let's look at a video clip of a baby cooing. So in that video of cooing, you heard long strings of vowels. Remember, these are meaningless. Babbling usually begins at around 6 months of age. This is the addition of consonants. So for example, ba, 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 or ma, ma, ma. And babbling is in fact intentional vocalization, but it still lacks specific meaning. So by the end of the first year, babbling does start to sound conversational, and it does start to sound meaningful, but it still isn't. They're just mimicking the sounds of the conversation that they've been hearing. Babbling allows for babies to figure out how to move their vocal tracts in order to make specific sounds. And they're not only fine-tuning their vocals, but they're also fine-tuning their ears. So during this time, infants learn which phonemes, remember smallest set of sound, are relevant for their own language. So they're learning phoneme recognition. So let's look at a video clip of a baby babbling.
Papa, 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 papa.
All right, so in that clip, you heard the addition of consonants, right? Vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant. Infants acquire the sounds of their language during the first year of life. But when do they begin using words to communicate? So here we have a figure that graphs the age in months against the number of words. So let's first look at this red line here, number of words comprehended. As you can see, 9 to 10 months of age is around when children usually begin to comprehend words. You can see that around 10 months of age, children comprehend about 20 words, but they can still not produce even one single word at 10 months of age. Production, this orange line right here, usually happens at around 12 to 14 months of age. This is kind of the same thing as when you're learning a language. Sometimes you can understand the language, but you can't yet produce the language. One of the first words that children understand is their own name, and they can actually understand and recognize their own name by 6 months of age. Now remember from the chart in the last slide that children understand other words by about 9 to 10 months of age. And also remember from the chart that children begin to produce words at around 1 year of age. Now remember, there's always variability. I'm just giving you the average age. Some children start earlier, some children start later. Now when infants start learning words, they'll often over and under extend the word's meanings. So overextension is when the word is used too broadly. So for example, orange is used to describe all round fruits, not just oranges. You're using the word orange too broadly. Underextension is when you do the opposite. The words are being used in a very limited way. So only your dog is a dog, but no other dogs are dogs. Your dog is a dog, other dogs are animals. So the word dog is only used for your dog, which is a very limited way. Genie is a great example of a case study. So we learned a lot about language by studying Genie. And the case of Genie helps us to learn how much of language is due to nature and how much of language is due to nurture. And Genie was deprived of language exposure. She was actually kept in a room by herself, strapped to a toilet or a kid's potty or a crib for the first 13 years of life. She had no social interactions with anyone. She was mute when she was rescued. And eventually, with a lot of therapy, she learned rudimentary language. So I'm going to show you a video of the Genie case.
For 13 years, Genie had lived a life of complete isolation. Raised in a city bedroom, Genie was as much a feral child as if she had been brought up by wolves. At 13, she was the size of a 6-year-old. Worst of all, she had never been taught to speak. The question now, could she ever learn? Genie's case was so scientifically important that the government funded a team of scientists to help answer the many questions she posed. Two of the scientists who would become especially important to Jeannie were child psychologist James Kent and linguist Susan Curtis. Neither had ever encountered a case as extreme as Jeannie's.
We looked at her as a newborn in a way, even though we know she hadn't. She came with 13 years of memories and experiences, not all of them wonderful, most of them not, I think. And so we thought we needed to start to expose her to what the world was going to be like for her outside the hospital bed.
To Jeannie, everything was a new experience.
We did what you would do with your own kids if you were introducing them to the world. You'd take them out and hold them up and show them, sort of judge from how they reacted to whether this was too much or not enough, and you could move on and do the next thing.
Jeannie was making amazing progress. As the experts looked on, they realized that she might be the answer to the question that had troubled science for so long.
So we seized this wonderful opportunity that she provided us in as loving a way as we could, but using it to finally get our chance to address head-on specific hypotheses and notions about human language and the human mind.
These hypotheses were based on the latest ideas about how children's brains developed. According to the theory, young children could only learn certain things at certain times, called critical periods. Language was one of these critical periods, and according to the theory, Jeannie, who was now a teenager, had missed her chance forever. But incredibly, Jeannie seemed to be proving the theory wrong. As this footage shows, Jeannie was blossoming. Not only was she delighted by the world around her, but she was learning the words for the new things she was seeing.
She was extremely interested in everything around her. She wanted to know the word for everything around her. She wanted to engage people all around her. She was not mentally deficient. Her lights were on, and everyone who worked with her, from teachers to therapists to me, knew that she was not retarded. It was clear as day. And as she began to learn more and more words, hundreds of words, much more rapidly than I ever imagined, and stringing them together, I began to think maybe I will be wrong. Maybe she will be the one that will prove that this hypothesis is incorrect.
So the Jeannie case is a really, really sad story. Now Jeannie is in her 60s. She turned 60 in 2017, and she's in a group care home. We're not exactly sure what has happened to her because she is protected. Her identity is protected. So what we learned from the case of Jeannie is that there doesn't seem to be a critical period for language acquisition. I know that your textbook does say that there's a critical period for learning language, but that is not the case. There is not a critical period for language acquisition. So critical period means that there's a window of opportunity to learn a language. And if you don't learn a language during that period, you will never learn the language. So a critical period, something has to happen during this period of time or it will never happen. The window is open during the critical period, and after the critical period ends, the window closes and that's it. There's no chance for learning. This is not what happens with language. With language, there's a sensitive period. A sensitive period is a time during which we are more receptive to learning. So there's a period of time during which we're more receptive to learning language, and that's actually when you're younger. The younger you are, the better and easier it is for you to learn a language. So it honestly makes no sense why there's so many schools in the United States that teach language beginning in junior high school or even high school. We should be learning languages in kindergarten or even in preschool, because the sensitive period, the time where we're more receptive to learning a language, is when we're young. All right, as usual, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask.